Well, good evening. It's the 21st of June, 2021. This is a SELCO meeting, monthly meeting. We're currently to order at 7 o'clock. Please bear with us as we have been Zoom meeting for the last 15 months or so, and this is our first live experience. It's also the first live experience in the big person's room here in the Selectman's office. So we're getting used to the technology, and with that said, for introduction to the SELCO, folks that may not be aware of how SELCO works, there are 5 commissioners that are assigned by the town manager, of which Mr. Trippi and Kelly Marshall, and then Maria Lemieux is on her way. I'm Bob Holland, I'm on the chair, and we also have another board member, Mike Ruffolo, who is on a microphone with his cell phone because he's getting ready to travel, and so we have him included. We do have 3 active members of the board. We do have a quorum, and we will get started on the meeting. So, calling the meeting of the open session to order, our first review and consider approval of the warrants and bill schedules. Those are being passed among the board members, and that's how that's normally handled. Welcome, Maria, right here. And so the warrants will be signed by the folks as we're going through for the evening. The next item to consider are the meeting minutes of May 25th, 2021, which was the last time that we met via Zoom. I would ask for a motion to, does anybody have any comments, first off, on any of the meeting minutes? I did notice that Mr. Zacco's name was misspelled as Rocco on one of the, that's already been corrected. Does anybody have any other changes to the minutes of the 25th of May?
No.
No, hearing none, do I have a motion to accept the minutes of May 25th?
I move we accept the minutes
Okay.
of May 25th.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now, there's no need to do a roll call vote anymore, so that we got that. And let's see, we'll move on to a review of the monthly financials. Mr. Roy, I'll turn that over to you.
All right, and with your permission, we'll have Jim Zacco speak to those.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. So I wanted to show you something a little bit different this month. We were able to get you a copy of what I'm thinking our summary balance sheet is going to look like going forward. And at different points of the year, I'd like to present both a balance sheet for electric and cable and kind of go through them. So everybody that has questions, whatnot, we can look at those. Today I wasn't planning on reading anything specific off the financials, but if there were any questions, I just wanted to take those so I could look into them and get back to everybody with the appropriate answers. So on the balance sheet, was everybody able to take a look or have any questions?
Well, I took a look. I didn't have any questions but not necessarily because it did seem to make sense to me.
Okay.
But I'm not the CPA of the group. And, Maria,
No,
did you?
I think the balance sheet's excellent, and I think that, you know, we had talked about this before, like presenting them on a quarterly basis. And I also think it's great that we have that, so then when we look at the financial statements at year end that have been audited, we have some comparison.
Perfect. And if you can scroll down past the balance sheet, one more. This is an example of the income statement, or a summary income statement, and I have it in 2 pages. One page gives us the budget to actuals on both the current month and then the year to date. And this is something I figure we can either review monthly, every other month, just so everyone can see it. And then if we scroll to the next page, you'll notice here we have 2021 compared to 2019. This was to show you this document, we can compare it to multiple years. We can compare it to a 5-year average. And one of the intents for this is something like 2020 is going to become an anomaly year. So we want to be able to show that, okay, if there's an anomaly year and we're comparing to it every time, I'm going to be talking about why there's major variances. It may make sense to skip a year at that point to show it to more of a standard year. But this is the kind of the format that I'm looking at or thinking to for kind of a summary income statement going forward. The next document is still in the format that I had last month for cable, I was only able to get to the electric file this month, but going forward, I'm planning on kind of mirroring both of these for electric and cable. And to Maria's point, you know, maybe every quarter we go over the balance sheet, and then maybe in between we either go over the income statement, we can double up on them, we can do other financials if you want, but I kind of wanted to get your feedback of what you think is the best documents to help you guys understand our situation.
Okay. Well, how about giving us the snapshot of, how do you think we stand year-to-date now?
So far, I don't think we're in bad shape, especially when we look to our budget to actuals and everything. So if you look at it, we're actually a little below budget from the current month's perspective. We're a little bit above from the year to date, but it's nothing from my opinion that I've seen that's necessarily worrisome. Because of COVID, there's a couple of things that got a little funky from the budgeting and planning perspective that I can see, but I haven't been able to dig into anything to see and be like, oh my God, this is an issue that is anything other than, you know, kind of COVID-related changes and stuff.
Okay. And our electric distribution, or the sales of, with the temperature, the high temperatures in May and whatnot, are all reflected in that?
Yes. So the first 3 months of the year had all those crazy, you know, weather anomalies from 2020 to 2021, which kind of put us there from a sales perspective.
Right.
That's why you can see the year-to-date net income is 191%. Kind of seems like what's going on, but it's really that weather anomaly. You know, 2020 was very warm, 2021 not so much.
Okay.
But are these, is your over-under accurate with the actuals? Because I'm just looking, it looks like the actuals are, like the actual number and the over-under, like it doesn't look like it's like a difference.
So when I'm looking at like the generation expense, the actuals, you know, where the 10K, the budgeted was the 20, and the over-under were, you know, 15K under budget.
Under the budget to current, but I'm looking at
Yeah.
the budget the year-to-date. Like, do you see that? Like, it's 103
Oh,
to
yeah.
59?
Let me check how that's pulling.
Yeah, I just think there's probably just something wrong in this, like all the way down on that, right?
No, I can see that. That does look a little odd. I will double check that, and we will fix that for next month.
Well, the gross income.
Okay. Tony, any comments, questions?
No, I don't have any.
Kelly, you got something?
No, I'm just asking her to explain something.
Okay.
Hello.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Mike, what you got?
Can you describe this difference? I think it's for the April 30 quarter on how the depreciation fund, this whole fund is now something like almost $5 million, but it was only 3.2. It looks like a big spread. I'm just wondering how that math works or how that works out.
So it has increased over the last year. It's something that I started looking into, but I don't have definitive answers for what the increase is related to at this time, Mike. But it's something that I can get back to you, and we can either email out the commission or we can talk about it at the next meeting. I just know there's a little bit of a break.
Go ahead, Chris.
Just to add one comment to that, and just to supplement Jim's feedback, is one of the things that we've encountered through discussing the audit with GSA has been how we treat the depreciation reserve versus the construction reserve. And so one of the things that would impact this number as we move things together and start to treat the depreciation account as the construction account, because it's really the same thing and it's restricted by how we collect it.
Yeah, that's what you said
Yeah,
before.
that's what we had talked about. Okay. So that's why I thought we had, okay, good. Any other questions by any of the, Maria?
There's a percentage that we need to monitor. What is that percentage?
For the return
Yeah.
at the end of the
yeah.
year is the 8% on
Okay.
gross plant.
On gross plant? so-
Excuse me, net plant.
Net plant?
Net plant. So that's the number, let's see if I can grab the page here.
Because I'm just thinking, is that if that's a number that we could incorporate into it, because it's a number that needs to be monitored, or a percentage that needs to be monitored, so that we can see that?
I'm not saying that I would have done it.
Well, I must say, it's overall, it's much clearer as to what's going on, and it's not, the percentages, it's easier to see, and it's good to see that you can shift this if we, I know there's, sometimes we talked about that we might have two separate snow years, but it's separated by 3 or 4 years, but at least we can pull that data in for the 2 years to be compare it, so you're
Yes.
comparing apples to apples.
We can also, and what I plan to do for the majority of the time, is compare it to a 5-year average. So this way, you're looking back instead of, year over year, you're seeing it year to that 5-year average. And I think that'll help with those anomalies too.
Okay, good. Any other questions from any of the other board members?
Nope.
No.
Okay,
I
we
like it.
have,
Thank you.
We'll accept the report, we'll just leave it at that, okay? The next is review and discuss the SELCO participation in MWEC Project 2015 Alpha, commonly known as the peaking plant of subject issues. So anyways, with that, I'll kiss over to Mr. Rhodes.
Thank you very much. So this project is, as folks may have seen locally, there's an uptick in public interest in the project as it starts to come closer to the actual steel in the ground phase. And so one of the things that I think has been helpful is to just kind of recap the background, how the project came to be, and then some of the options out there along with the potential consequences that these decisions could have. So maybe just the quick highlights of the memo. I was hoping to capture it in the long form here, but as the project title indicates, 2015 was the year that the project was initiated for feasibility, and then in 2017, the project feasibility results were available, and it revealed favorable financial results. Since that time, going through the permitting process and the siting, here we are in 2021, where we're now revisiting this project. But while the project may not have changed, there's been a substantial amount of policymaking activity over these years. And so that evolution is now being reflected in the review of the project. And so the issue at hand being the fact that this is a peaking fossil-fueled unit with gas, where as recently as January, the state has, been plotting this trajectory towards a fossil fuel-free future. And so, so with that comes the question of, well, is it too late to make this project fossil fuel-free? And so that's really a lot of the engineering components of this are driving the conversation about what can we do with this project, what are our options, and so that's been the primary subject of discussion. And so,
Okay, can I just interrupt?
yes, sir.
First off, this is a plant that's going to be built in Peabody, Massachusetts. Nowhere in the Worcester County area. It's a Peabody issue, and that's where that community has been most active in that, in the NIMBY issue of not in my backyard. It's about a 55 megawatt plant, as I recall, and it's a peaker, which means it only operates probably about 2% of the actual time on the calendar, and only comes on when there's time, when needed for additional power, as an example, on a very hot day in the summer, where, air conditioners are all running and more people have gone to EV vehicles and they all want to charge their cars, and you got to, bend the, turn power on that one, so you have a peaker. Could also be in the winter because of the dark months and solar doesn't go down, or the wind doesn't blow, or and any number of reasons where you have to have a backup. And using a gas turbine, which can be started fairly expeditiously, you can bring this up to full power, put the power on the grid, and then as soon as the demand goes down, take it down. And it's it's not like a nuclear power plant where you take days to start it up. It's not like a coal burner where you got to shovel coal in there and make it happen. It's almost an instantaneous ad. And as a matter of fact, we have one in town, a much smaller one, which we use for local use. But the big question becomes political because there's 14 different communities, as I understand it, that are a part of the MWIC scenario of which each one is being directly, I won't say assaulted, but approached by those who oppose a peaker plant. And so that's what's going on. Right now, we're all part of MWIC, and we're all part of, we've got, was it skin in the game, I guess it is, the best thing to say is towards building this thing. And so that's the issue, right? Just whether we stay the course right now, continue to try to make sure we have a peaker, because nobody can, everyone says we're going to have a solution in the future, but nobody can tell me exactly what that solution is. And so, am I going too far in this, or is that basically what we're getting to? You know, so, okay, with that, I'm sorry, Chris, I'll
No,
turn it
no,
back to you.
please, that's, I think that's a great summary, and so,
Yeah.
and just to maybe highlight a few of the discussion points, again, because I'm sure there's a number of examples where, how technology has evolved since 2015 to today, and so some of the questions are, well, what's available 7 years later that might serve as an appropriate substitute? And so the primary one that comes up is batteries. And so that's been the subject of some of the data gathering, I guess, which is how viable is today's battery technology to replace a unit like this? And in summary, and happy to answer any further questions, but in summary, the technology's not there to meet the same capacity levels. You know, there are batteries that, you know, generally could provide some peak shaving for 4 hours, but they still need to be charged, and we have data that shows a number of peak events last more than 4 hours. So what do you do then? And so it's really, it's not quite there. And again, to get the same capacity value, you need a much larger footprint, which is more battery units. So from a cost perspective, the battery technology isn't there either.
And we've done a deep dive in this in the past, in that when we put solar on the first part of the landfill down on Route 20, we actually were looking at what it would take to potentially, during the day, charge batteries so we could, you know, catch the peak
You also
later
looked
on.
at that for the peaking plant,
Yeah,
too,
we,
'cause
yeah,
remember,
and we,
someone
yeah,
came in and
exactly, but the
wanted
millions
batteries.
of dollars
Yeah.
with the, you know, for the batteries, with the technology that currently exists,
Right.
and the lack of capacity, and it just was, made it totally unaffordable and.
Not to say we're not, we're
Yeah,
against.
I mean,
batteries.
I've been,
Great.
I've been very much,
Yeah.
you know, very much forward about, we gotta have something because in the future for renewables, but I just don't think it's there yet. And it's kinda like, you know, going canoeing and deciding you're not gonna wear a life vest because I'll have time when it tips over, I can get my life vest on. And you're going through the rapids, and all of a sudden, you find out that, oh dang, the canoe did tip over and I can't get to my life jacket. It's just like, okay, I'm gonna do away with this peaker because I don't think we're gonna need it. And all of a sudden, we find out we don't have the backup, and now we don't have the lead time to make a plan.
But there's also costs involved to not going, like, you know, there's costs, I mean, there's costs involved to go through with the project, but there's also costs involved to abandon the project. So I think, like, that's on the next page, and that's probably an important topic to talk about as well.
And we're already probably
You know-
jumping everything.
Yeah, like,
Jeez.
what it's gonna cost us, and, like, but I guess ultimately, who's gonna make the decision whether or not it happens?
Yeah, well, what, 20%? No, 12%, 13%, yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, Chris,
Oh, geez, no, please. So I guess I'll cover all of those talking points. The component, well, one other comment, I guess, to add to that is that if the peaking plant doesn't run, that's a measurement of success, because that means our normal operating conditions of the grid have not required the emergency implementation of this unit. And so there's a much larger plan in play here, which is ISO, to say you need to manage the grid appropriately so this unit doesn't run. And so we're compensated for the fact that it's available in case they need it. And so there's a whole peak shaving, I guess, change that we need across the board to not need this unit, but it is there, the life jacket, if you will, great analogy, to be available. And so from the cost perspective, so there's one other technological element is just to cover the second base of this. Most feasible, because this is a universal problem across the country for the grid. We have strategic electrification, so loads are only going up. And so one of the things we're looking to do is part of this project pause and part of the evaluation is a conversion of the fuel source to hydrogen. So as hydrogen technology becomes more prevalent, we can incorporate as much as technologically feasible today, and there's obviously more research with any type of cost implications. But over time, along that pathway to 2050, that feasibly could be 100% hydrogen-fueled units. So we're no longer talking gas. So there are other components to achieve the capacity numbers that we're trying to hit, but with other technology.
Yeah, and the fringe part too is that there's been talk about how much oil was going to be burnt at this plant or stored, because oil was in fact going to be a backup source should gas for somehow fail, the pipelines fail, and we need to have power as an emergency, they would have oil, as a backup. But I think that's something that mostly going to be held out there as a red herring, that it's going to be an oil, furnace, fossil fuel thing. It's not. It's a gas powered right now, and hopefully the hydrogen in the out years.
And I'm sorry to speak to the cost, to the last point there. The chart on the second page, again, to cover all the bases, the MWIC project team evaluates the available options. Canceling the project altogether is an option. And so that's what the chart is on the second page, based on percentage share. Shrewsbury at, well, just shy of 13%. The projected cancellation cost, if you will, is about $4 million. And that is hopefully a conservative number, because there are other measures, for instance, selling the unit to someone else, that would drive that number down. But if we had to take the unit and there wasn't a market to sell the unit to someone else, it would be a $4 million liability for Shrewsbury share.
That's just to Shrewsbury, right?
Yes.
Right now, it looks like it's about $31 million for the 14 communities to say, okay, we're going to totally walk away from this project. And Shrewsbury has, 16,000 users, so you divide that 4 million, it gives out to about $250 per electric customer today would have to pay up to shut this plant down.
So that's the table on page 2, and so really the most heavily pursued option is the third one, which is to incorporate any technological fuel changes, and I guess other components that go into the stabilization of the plant that is beyond my knowledge set with generation, but those types of options, even not to go down this path too much, but even the purchase of RECs to offset any runtime, because now we're supplementing the emissions component with an investment in some other renewable resource. But again, you still get that engineering component of bolstering the grid in a time of need. And so that's really, I guess, been the messaging, and there's, I believe, a page in the packet too, that there is a public session in PBD to address many of the North Shore concerns, and others for that matter, but they're holding that session to discuss these very items, gather input from the local communities, and help better inform some of that research, over the next month or so.
How does it look like it's going? Were there any ideas or a lot of opposition?
I have to say the opposition is fairly fierce. The Waters River substation, which is that PBD substation, is in an industrial area. They have a peaking unit there, so that was why the site was chosen. But it's a very different environment, no pun intended, from 2015, and so it's what can we do to minimize those impacts while making it the most advanced unit out there. And so that's where Pratt & Whitney is the engine provider. So one of the conversation components is Pratt & Whitney has a business to evolve as well. So are you, some of this conversation is, what are you looking at as a company in terms of, more advanced technologies? And we'll be happy to partner and potentially be a pilot. And so there's an engagement with them. There's an engagement with the state to say, as you set these targets and engage with ISO, how can we be a part of that? So that those are a number of moving parts that are.
Well, I think over the years, we've held the mantra that we're going to provide most reliable power for the lowest possible cost. We've been also environmentally very sensitive, especially with with our most recent building of the solar site, and also the taking a look of a second solar site on the top of the second cap down at our the landfill potential, that we're using every available space that we have to be able to place renewable in position. The electrification of the town is very important to us. We've already worked, I see Mr. Collins is here tonight, and been working to get the library an EV charger, potentially Dean Park an EV charging station. We think that the Beal School the new Beal School is going to have EV charging capability. I'd like to see the high school get it, because I think we catch the new generation driving their cars as juniors and seniors, and we also have the teachers up there, so it's a viable thing. I know Jackie Pratt's come up with the potential of maybe even taking the Edgemere Diner and changing that into a actual, almost an EV filling station, where you can go down there, rapid charge, and maybe continue to have a product served for, while you wait. Those kind of things. The old Beal School with the reuse of, going and making sure that we're insisting during the building, the reuse of that property, that it goes to, electrification and future generation, just much like anybody else going for that 2050 goal. So, I mean, it's not like we're shutting down on the potential or the concerns that the citizens did express at town meeting. I'm a town meeting member and expressed the same thing, that there is a climate emergency. But part of that climate emergency is if and when you don't have a solution come 2050 and you still need air conditioning to run and you can't do it because you failed to build this peaking plant or whatever, that I just think we would be totally wrong. And I think we would go against our mantra of providing reliable power.
You'd be negligent.
I think we'd be negligent. Help me, that's right. And none of the people that were against it would come forward and say, oh, I was one of those people that voted, against it. So, anyways. Okay, well, that's just my diatribe, and I'll give it, any other comments on any of our correct staff that's present tonight think that anything else that we left out? No?
If I may make one more comment, not to
Yes, sir.
belabor the topic, but I do, we've talked about the integrated resources team as it pertains to our personnel. This is where you start to see that integration. So if we have success with our programming content, with shaving the peak, having folks participate in the virtual peaker program that can, say, offset or shift the use of air conditioning, or when they charge their vehicles, or when they do laundry, that all then goes back to this unit, which means it doesn't have to run. And so that's where all these things start to integrate together, and we're trying to create a comprehensive strategy to make it all work.
About 2 years ago, I think, Jackie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, we put out, for the first time, that you could get an EV charger, I think it was a Class 2, that we would pay for and have it put in your garage. The only proviso that we put in there was that we didn't want you running it during the peak hours.
Okay.
Oh, my God, the hue and cry of people that, you tell me why I can't charge my car. Hey, we got to get a hold of that, because part of this, you don't want a peaking plant, well, you better also be able to, hold your water when it comes to energy and use it at the most proper time. But we saw that even back then, and is this going to be more and more as more cars become EV and people want to charge, when do you actually charge it, when to make it happen, so. Anyways, that gets into all the other conservation efforts that we can make to help preclude, build it, hey, and if we don't use it, then we can all be victorious, to the fact that we have it and we didn't need it. But, I don't know, that's just me. Anybody else, comments?
Well, this would prevent a situation
Yeah.
like what happened in Texas, right?
I'm agreeing with everything you
would
say.
definitely.
I think it's great that you're bringing it all up.
Peak is also there are health issues involved and safety issues involved at peak times. So it's not just about someone overrunning their air conditioning. So the fact that we're viewing this as if we must, I think is the responsible view. But we also must provide services at the peak. So
Yeah.
we do what we have to do.
Yeah, whether it's, providing cooling stations for elderly or the senior center or whatever, being able to do that, it's important. Well, okay, if no other comments on that, we do have there was a review and discussion, but I think part of it is, we almost really need to have a motion, I'd like to have a motion at least, that we concurred to follow along with the third option of basically the alternatives, which leads us down to modify the project to incorporate the latest environmentally responsible technologies and stay the course right now. Can I have a motion to select
Yes, option 3. I move that we accept option 3 as the preferred option.
and a second on that?
Second.
Okay, and all in favor?
Aye.
Mike, okay. Mike, okay?
I think I
Yeah,
heard now.
I agree.
Okay, thank you. Then with that, let's move on to the next item, which happens to be power supply policy presentation, review and consider approval of the, I believe Jackie's going to, Jackie Pratt?
Yeah, so flowing from one exciting conversation into the next here, this is, as Chris pointed out, all about integrated resources. As our integrated resources team starts looking at the path to 2050, which is the goal for net zero carbon emissions, Chris, myself, Ralph, and Patrick, we're finding it more and more important for us to have a clear-cut power supply policy set by the commission. So today we're just going to talk a little bit about the reasons why we feel that that's going to be necessary, setting this up for an actual proposal at the next meeting. So really, what a power supply policy does is it provides a framework to evaluate all of our potential generation sources as well as how we treat RECs in terms of sale or retirement or purchase. And as we start to meet these new power portfolio emission requirements, we're going to be looking to you guys to set that tone through a power supply policy. It also helps us with long-term strategic planning and is pretty much a best practice that you see in utilities of all sizes, investor-owned and public power throughout the country. Power supply is a four-legged stool, so when we talk about wholesale electricity, there are four components that go into that. So it's energy, which is the actual power, the commodity, capacity, transmission, and environmental attributes, which are the RECs, which is separate from power. So when we talk about RECs are renewable energy certificates, and one REC is the equivalent to 1 megawatt hour of electricity generated by a renewable resource like wind or solar or hydro. When we buy a REC, we're buying the environmental attribute, not the actual electricity generated. So there are two separate pieces to this. There are also emission-free energy certificates, which are EFECs, and this would be the attributes for sources like nuclear, which are carbon-free but not renewable. These do count towards our emission reductions in S9.
What's S9?
S9, we'll talk about that in a second, is the climate bill that passed the House
Okay.
and Senate and was signed into law.
Right.
So when we talk about RECs, it's a really good analogy that Patrick came up with, which was the house and deed analogy. So you can live in a house that you don't own, and you can own a house you don't live in. So if the energy is a house and the deed is the REC, I can live there because I'm buying the energy, but I don't own the deed, which is being able to claim it as renewable resource. So when we talk about getting energy from a solar plant, if we don't also buy the REC, we're just getting the energy, not the environmental attribute to claim against our portfolio.
Well, Jackie, isn't this where some large public utilities are going and buying RECs out in out in New Mexico and Arizona and saying we're now, renewable, 100% renewable, when in fact any of the power they're actually using is still being generated locally from gas turbines and everything else, but we own the REC for power out in the desert.
Yeah, exactly. So whoever bought that power from the source in the desert doesn't get to claim it that way because they bought only the power and not the REC. So yes, that is how it works. So some industry developments that are kind of pushing us in this direction as well is stuff like Mass Climate Action Network has an MLP report card that comes out every couple of years evaluating sustainability and emissions for municipal light plants. We now have annual MAP reporting to the state, which is a municipal action plan about our efforts for decarbonization and efficiency, electrification. And then as we talk about electrification, really what that means is fuel switching. So shifting fossil fuel use to electric. So when we talk about our electric vehicles, right, we're talking about shifting gasoline to electricity or shifting our home heating oil to electricity. So it actually results in more kilowatt hour sales versus reducing consumption, which has been the focus in the past. And we talked about like conservation programs and efficiency programs, the desire was to reduce electric consumption. Today, electric provides the bridge that we need to get to these goals that have been set by S9, which again, we will talk about in a minute. So another one is the APPA came out with a Smart Energy Provider designation, which helps identify utilities that have forward-looking goals regarding decarbonization, efficiency, electrification. We got our designation in 2020. We're going to renew it in 2022. As we look at decarbonization, right, you're talking about buying these RECs out in the desert, Bob. It's not just utilities that are doing this. A lot of companies have decarbonization goals, and what that's doing is that's putting a lot of pressure on the REC markets because companies are buying these, not just utilities. So with the REC market sort of heating up, so to speak, it becomes even more important to have an idea of how we want to approach that component. Do we want to tie it to specific projects we're buying power from? Do we want to buy RECs on the market? And then when we talk about the state adoption of the climate bill, that is, it sets clear emission standards for us. And S9 was passed in March. It does set greenhouse gas emission standards for all utilities. 50% carbon-free by 2030, 75% by 2040, and net zero by 2050. We have as MLPs, municipal light plants, standards that we have to match in 2030 specifically. And under this new S9 bill, retirement and attribution of RECs are totally separate from power, as we've been discussing. So you can't double count for sources where you're getting the power from a renewable resource, but not retaining ownership of the RECs, as we discussed, that house and deed concept. There are some teeth in the bill where there would be alternative compliance payments for MLPs that don't meet the standards for each year of noncompliance. But also, there's some flexibility in it. The law provides us with the ability to maintain local control in our decision-making, which is one of the incredible benefits of public power, right? So when we look beyond the bill and some of these other factors, as Bob mentioned, there is a local level climate emergency declared at town meeting this year. There's the potential to have a future municipal energy use and sustainability policy. As we move towards strategic electrification and we're shifting from fossil fuels to electricity, the greener and cleaner our power mix is, the more effective that actually is for emissions reduction. So trying to enable it through that path. And then our customer satisfaction survey showed strong support and desire for us to reduce carbon in our portfolio and promote environmentally friendly policies. You know, there's a lot of unknowns out there. Green New Deal, infrastructure plan, energy policy. There could be future standards or benchmarks set at the federal or state level that we don't even see coming just yet.
It's not gonna be one of these things where the federal and state issue all these mandates and don't give us any money to take care of it afterward.
That never happens.
Well,
Never seen that happen.
I don't know how that would reflect on an MLP, which operates a little bit differently than like a municipal government mandate.
Just saying.
But that said, you know, looking at our 2019 customer satisfaction survey results, we're doing a pretty good job. 96% of people think we're balancing environmental and fiscal responsibilities well. 48% want us to be very or somewhat aggressive in reducing emissions. Half say we're doing enough right now, and 75% say they want us, it is very or somewhat important for us to promote environmentally conscious practices. So the other thing we asked customers to do last time around was rank their priorities. Reliability, cost, and carbon reduction. Give them a number, 1, 2, and 3. What are your top, how do you rank these top 3 priorities? And 32% of our customers said they want carbon reduction to be first or second priority. Now, with these results that we got in 2019, we're actually about to do another survey in the next few weeks, and we're asking these questions again, so we can benchmark changes in customer sentiment, how they answered 2 years ago and how they're answering now, so we can track that change over time. And we're going to be asking other questions about sentiment about different fuel sources. So as we're talking about carbon-free, you know, hydro, nuclear, solar, wind, and the different cost benefit factors there. And so when we're looking at all of these reasons why we need a power supply policy, I think that being that we're a local municipal utility We're public power. We're here to serve the people. We're, as you guys all said, the best service at the lowest cost. I think that we have a lot of flexibility to do this in a way that has the total vibe of what SELCO is about. Okay, we can do this successfully. We can continue to provide the best service at the lowest cost. As all of the utilities, IOUs and MLPs, stretch to meet that net zero portfolio standard by 2050, there are going to be different costs incurred by each of these entities as they're trying to reach that same goal. So, you know, we have a lot of hydro and nuclear, and I think that's going to remain a significant contributor to our power supply, as well as MLPs and within our region. And those tend to be more cost-effective measures for sure. But if we approach these goals strategically, we should be able to maintain our position relative to the pack, right? We can do this and be aggressive with our approach, but do it in a smart way, fiscally responsible way, so we can still be among the lowest when you look at the charts. So, thank you for keeping up with me, by the way, if you're following along. So some of the ways we can do that is to sell RECs for projects that use the REC sales in the pro forma analysis of project finances. So whether that's like a Berkshire Wind or the solar project. And then over time, as our different milestones are met economically, we can transition to retiring those RECs if they provide a higher value to us through retirement versus sale when we look at our portfolio. Another way we can talk about increasing our carbon-free resources without necessarily selling or retiring those high-cost RECs would be to purchase and retire lower-cost RECs from other state or regional sources. So to Bob's point, our policy might be to seek sources local to the New England grid versus somewhere out west that doesn't really have any impact locally. And offsetting some of these other projects that we might be selling the high-cost RECs, buying lower-cost ones to retire them from within our footprint here. As we're entering into new power contracts, we're seeking ones that do include the REC retirement when rates are favorable, and a lot of that has to do with the ability to tie the REC back to a specific project. And that has to do with the stress and strain we're seeing on the REC market from these entities out there that are looking to bolster their own street cred when it comes to renewable power and carbon emissions. So by having a contract that calls out the REC retirements as part of our power purchase, that gives us some stability in being able to plan. We're also seeking contracts that include EFECs, which are those the nuclear or some other potential projects out there that maybe we aren't aware of just yet, and other environmental attributes like through NIPA hydro, we may be able to get RECs for those, or they might be able to get an EFEC for those, undetermined just yet. And then through our direct local impact here, we have our distributed generation sources in Shrewsbury. This is all the solar that's been installed on individual homes through our MLP solar rebate program. And our plan would be to continue to retire RECs from that. Part of the rebate program is, we're giving the customers money towards their project out of the gate, and we retain ownership of those RECs. So retirement of those RECs is extremely local. And then considering ownership in new renewable projects, including the REC retirement components as opportunities come up and when costs are reasonable, and investing in transmission projects if costs are favorable. So by cobbling this together and having this as a clear strategy that we're setting for ourselves, it helps us make decisions as individual projects and opportunities come up. And this kind of positions us to be a progressive industry leader, and we do that by being the best at what we do and setting the standards for other MLPs to follow. We're really well respected within our industry. We're well respected by our customers. Our satisfaction surveys show that. And I think we've got a really great reputation to uphold, and we can position ourselves very well on how to do this in a forward-thinking, fiscally responsible way. And establishing ourselves as a local leader on environmental issues through some of these other programs that we're talking about through the Integrated Resources Department, whether that's the EV projects or our Connected Homes or Virtual Peaker program, promoting electrification. We're working collaboratively with MWIC to provide a cost-effective power supply strategy to see what it would look like to meet our goals ahead of the S9 schedule that's set. Because the S9 schedule is the state's bare minimum. You have to do it by this date. There's no other option. So is there a way for us to be ahead of the curve and a little bit better and still maintain that reliability and that fair pricing that our customers are used to seeing? And as we look to other opportunities, we're partnering proactively with the town to provide expertise for emission reductions in public buildings. As we were talking about the new police station, I know Chris was involved in some of those conversations, as well as economic development projects, to Bob's point, where we're talking about the Beale School redevelopment, trying to promote electrification there. The portfolio of programs that we're trying to put together through integrated resources in collaboration with MWIC and some programs directly run here would be to promote emerging technologies that reduce emissions and help drive that electrification. So again, this is talking about things like that really neat virtual peaker connected homes program where we're incentivizing the participation. So yes, we might turn up your thermostat a couple degrees, but we're compensating you for that because the value is there to us as a utility where we don't have to turn on that peaking plant. So when we look at our 2020 power supply, this is the full picture. So these little bubbles here with the numbers over them are the different fuel types and the percentages. And then we also have energy mix from open and hedged power that we buy. But according to the kind of definition that we've been using, that if it comes from solar, it's solar, without regard particularly to owning and retaining the RECs. We're 3.61% there. We're 4.66% for wind, 8.83 for hydro, 26.73 for nuclear, which is carbon-free. And then the fossil fuel contracts that we have a relatively low percentage overall. That puts us about 44% non-emitting. But when we look at the definition from S9, which is what we're going to have to hold ourselves to as we're reaching those milestones in 2030 and 2040 and 2050, today we're about 35% non-emitting. And the RECs that we're retiring for solar allow us to claim the projects that we're retiring locally through the MLP rebate and through our Greenlight program. The wind project, we did offset the sale of the Berkshire Wind RECs through the purchase and retirement of some Maine Class 2. That's 1.8%. Hydro is mostly coming from NIPA, which we will be able to get environmental attributes from as we move forward. They're looking to lock that in. And of course, Seabrook and Millstone Nuclear will be S9 compliant because they are carbon-free. So we have a good base to start from to hit each of these
But in
goals as we move
2030,
forward.
we need to be at 50%.
True. Yep, so we're gonna roadmap how to get there at our next meeting, but this is really part of the need to adopt a power supply strategy, a power supply policy, so that as we're trying to fill in these blanks on that road to 2050, that we have clear guidelines for the management team here on how we're gonna do that and keep it in alignment with the commission's goals. So that's exactly what we're gonna do at the next meeting, is we're gonna propose to you a power supply policy and a specific path to 2050. And what that looks like on an escalated schedule, an advanced schedule, as well as the state's baseline of the 50% in 2030, 75 in 2040, and 100 in 2050. So just laying the groundwork for why it's important. I know that in previous meetings, there had been some question about RECs and how this all works and why we need one of these. So we figured it would be beneficial to kind of give you the lay of the land on all of these different factors that are influencing the direction we need to go in as a utility and make sure we have a good strategy as a group.
Yeah. I think a lot of stuff to reach these goals is really going to be driven by what's quote-unquote the infrastructure bills that are going through the federal government right now, and whether or not infrastructure is going to include transmission lines and whatnot in the right-of-ways, because, again, you get into the NIMBY market. We've already seen that with hydro. With Quebec Hydro, we wish we could get more, but we could. They could generate all they want, but to try to get transmission lines put through New Hampshire, Vermont, and/or Maine is non-obtainium. And so as a result, how do you get the power that you can possibly use to, same thing's gonna happen with solar and wind. The big panacea is that all the windmills are gonna be off of the coast and over the horizon, and nobody's gonna see them and everything else, but I hope they can, but then when you get it ashore, how do you transmit all that power? Because nobody's gonna want the transmission lines coming up the beach and, heading out, so. Well, good challenges, Jackie.
Very well thought out.
Yeah. There might be a career in this. No.
We'll see, don't pin me down just yet.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, I'd like to, for maybe the next meeting, I would ask that, is there a way of getting is the ISO New England app available? Is that public?
Yes.
Because I'd like to be able to show it, periodically, that, like right now, I mean, they show what's being for fuel right now, what's powering.
Yep.
It's, right now, it's 69% natural gas, 19% nuclear, 7% renewable, 4 hydro, and less than 1% oil, coal, and others. And then they get the really nice little thing, they can go to renewables. And what's renewable? And amazingly, tonight, by renewables, 49% is wind. 28% is burning trash, because that's considered to be renewable. So the plant over in Millbury there is one of the renewable sites based on ISO. And 21% is burning wood. So I was in Maine and seeing that they were doing that. And less than 1% is landfill gas, and of course, it's getting dark now, so it's less than 1% solar. And I see nothing that says battery. So, I mean, we've got a long, long way to go, but it's a very good snapshot for any and all people to take a look. And ISO is all of New England, it's not just Massachusetts, but at least gives you an idea what's going on there. But if we can maybe flash that up once or twice, a year or something, so we can see what we're doing. Maybe on a bright day, we'll show it too, so we can get some solar in there. But, anybody can go, and it's an app, and you can go to ISO New England, and you'll know what we know. Anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, does anybody have any questions for me, or Ralph, or Chris, or?
What'd you say, you just said something about next month, what you got up your sleeve there, young lady?
Well, so that the Integrated Resources Team's gonna, Chris has drafted a policy, and Patrick and Ralph are working on a chart of percentages and goals that we're gonna set. So we can give you 2 different options. I think they were gonna do some financial analysis too, so you can see the potential impact on rates of each of the options. And I'm just gonna sit up here and talk about it. They're doing all the work.
Okay, will part of that be how do we, we talked about generating and getting all this great, renewable power, but, obviously, the other part you mentioned was how do we reduce the overall electric demand, or relatively speaking, especially when everybody's buying electric cars.
Exactly.
But, so how do we balance that? I know we're doing our fair share, quote unquote, with some of the rebates that we have going. Would you have, we doing something, on electric appliances and stuff, or outside?
Yeah.
Outside stuff, what's going on there?
Yeah, so we've got a new rebate that just kicked off last Wednesday.
It's not gonna solve our problems, but.
Not to solve the problem, but it's a battery electric outdoor lawn equipment rebate. So to encourage electrification out in your yard as well as around your home, right? So it's kind of big picture stuff.
What if you already bought it? I bought a few
Well,
battery.
there's a window, it started, if you only bought it in the last couple of days, you might be within the window, Tony.
Couple of.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I think we had some interest in it when we were at the farmer's market last week, and hopefully it takes off. It's a good opportunity. But these are all sound like very little things. When you start to put them together, I mean, it's a mindset of this fuel shifting, which is where we're going to end up. And to your point, Bob, we're gonna need time of use rates and all kinds of other approaches to try and ensure that we are creating demand where it's most appropriate, right?
So this is electric lawnmowers, this is even a riding lawnmower, there's a rebate for that, and hedge clippers and all sorts of stuff. So, I mean, if you're gonna buy some garden supplies and wanna get a few bucks back, take a look at that, because you go electric, and that'll help on that electrification side of the house. Good, okay. Any comments from anybody else?
No,
No?
that's good.
Okay. I think that's it, we just don't have anything to vote on, we accept the report, and nice job, and we look forward to hearing from you in the future.
Thank you, Jackie.
Okay, and the final item for the open session tonight is the general manager's highlights, and probably stole half your thunder in the process, but,
No, jeez.
okay.
Yeah, in the theme of just trying to be brief, I figured I'd give a little background. I think the operational items certainly speak for themselves, but I'd give some background on some of the legislative bits, and certainly, obviously, answer any questions. So I picked these, however many there are there, just several of the legislative items to in an effort, I guess, to kind of paint the picture about what's happening outside of SELCO's borders, and in some cases outside of Massachusetts borders, all of which kind of set the stage for the theme of the industry and help perhaps provide context to some decision-making and policy-making efforts that we might have more locally. So one of the things that, we're talking S9, we just had the power supply presentation, we talked the peaking plant, and so just another interesting tidbit there, if you saw the first bullet point, is the Attorney General comparing the disclosure of financial risks of climate change for companies. And so again, it's part of that evolution of efforts to say what factors of our operations as in society, I guess, are contributing to this, to this situation. And so that's just a little tidbit there. And as more and more folks talk about this, I think that puts more and more emphasis on what can we do about it. And the next step for that is what can we do about it? Well, the only energy source really that's out there that can provide these emissions reductions is electricity. So ultimately, the ball comes back to our court to make sure we're operating the grid in a reliable manner, as well as incorporating these power supply strategies to keep pace. And then I always like to throw in some other tidbits about, I feel like it's a general, and I apologize if you don't think the same thing, but bigger is better. And so I like to put in the tidbits about some of how the IOUs are operating, because as the major market share player,
And IOUs stand for what?
and the investor-owned utilities, and so these are utilities that serve multiple states, perhaps, and in some cases are within the state, but they are the big players in the landscape of electricity, and so I'd just like to highlight that there's a lot of things that stand to be desired that public power like ourselves do much, much better. And so activities like the power supply policy or investment in technologies that bolster grid reliability, we're really showcasing how utilities should operate. And so they can turn to us for guidance. And then just some other, that covers a couple of the bullet points. Kind of a neat project. Again, as infrastructure, we see more and more federal activity about infrastructure and things like that. We have some involvement with UMass to really start to show how our model has been a real boon for infrastructure investment. So, and again, turning to Shrewsbury for guidance and leadership on that is, I think, a feather in our cap. And again, same thing, I'll just call out this last one because I'll admit it's my favorite one. But again, Maine, it's hard to argue, right? If you operate a utility inefficiently for so long, eventually someone will catch on, hopefully. And so, Maine, again, in Mass, the data shows, on average, our public power, 41 public power agencies in Mass are 42% lower in rates than National Grid and Eversource. In Maine, it's 58%. And so that's just the financial component, never mind reliability, customer service, all of which still don't measure up against our metrics. And so here we are, it's a bipartisan bill that says we can do this better. They're fighting and dumping a lot of lobbying money into fighting that, but, Pine Tree Power, if you read the article, would be more like a NYPA. So we talk about our NYPA hydropower. I won't spend a lot of time, I apologize, I'm getting a little long-winded, but NYPA, there already is a model for this. New York Power Authority does a similar function, so.
Well, isn't part of Maine's problem the fact that the largest owner of who provides power to the state of Maine is owned by Spain?
Yes, yep, so Central Maine Power is really a Spanish company. All of their purchase orders go to Spain for approval. The office layouts have to mirror the Spanish office layouts. It's a very much, National Grid, our neighboring communities are all British.
British, yeah.
So, when you fly the CEO out to a public hearing, which doesn't happen, he's coming from England.
Yeah.
So it's a whole different ballgame. And again, programs like, we pay, in Shrewsbury, you pay $1 into our efficiency programs, we put $1 right back, and you can trace it through the financials. With the IOUs, they say, well, what's in it for us? They skim a percentage off the top for the margin, and you get a discounted investment. So it's a whole different model on things, so. And then similar, that's the last bullet, I won't spend any more time, but the last bullet is we did fight to get some form of, investment tax credit. There's incentives there for private sector investments that relate to their tax payments. We don't pay taxes. But this was, I think, a really great move in the right direction to have public power nationwide be able to receive some investment incentives that aren't tax related. And so then, I guess, happy to answer any questions, hopefully provided some background from our last discussion last month. We talked about EV chargers,
I
so.
stole that, I'm sorry.
And then the rest, I think it's just a snippet of what we've been working on out in the field, if you see the crews. Fiber plant, our biggest project, obviously, I'll speak to that real quick. We're nearing the conclusion of phase 1, so we've been ramping up discussions to get phase 2 engineered and bid, and incorporating some of the lessons learned from phase 1. So that's actively ongoing on a daily basis, I should say. So the other one I thought was really interesting, the clear fiber module. That's really the key step, and correct me if I misspeak, but that's the key step to actually now lighting up the fiber and signing on new customers. And so that, that'll be a major step to start to transition folks from the coax plant to the fiber plant, and the clear fiber was a key piece in that.
Chris, I went out of town for 3 days this weekend, and 2 of the days the town didn't have internet. Can we explain to the listening public what happened? I know it wasn't me,
Yeah,
because I do my Pontius Pilate, because I was out.
yeah, you were, yeah.
Yeah.
The doctor speaks.
How are you, sir?
Doing very well. So we have
Better than you
a,
were this
Go
weekend?
straight to the source.
fortunately, we had an outage on Friday morning. I started around 4 a.m. We have 2 main modulators in the head end that each are feeding half of the town. One of the modulator started acting up, and when we say acting up is we started seeing faults, and we started receiving alarms at 4 a.m. Technicians came on site. Gino, I know you guys know him, he was one of the guys on call, and he called me, he woke me up, and we started calling people because the type of alarms that were coming in, we knew there was something major going on. We rushed and we started, trying to troubleshoot, figure out, and it ended up the actual chassis. It's a big piece of equipment. It is a 12-year-old piece of equipment. We are desperate. That's kind of why we're desperate on finishing the completion of the fiber project, because we want to decommission that kind of equipment. And, with the resetting and trying to get it back up, the unit, something else broke. And it ended up, we had to take it down on the spot and try to correct it. We had a spare unit that we put it in, but we have to rewire we're talking about hundreds of connections, literally, that had to be migrated on the spot. Luckily, as you guys know, it was a holiday for us, but luckily, Jackie and her team, Robin, the help desk, we were able to get a hold of everyone and notify the customers of what was happening. So the outage by 10:15 was when we got everyone back online. We think there was still something lingering, but with so many changes that we made, I think on Sunday, we experienced a different type of outage, not by the unit that we had just replaced, but another unit that talks to it. And that was like, okay, another another outage. That one was a more of a 45-minute outage. The other one was like from 4 a.m. Started happening, and it just kept getting worse. So we are currently working with Cisco, who is the manufacturing of the unit. They actually want us to reset the unit one more time, and they want to run some tests, so we'll probably do something in the middle of the night on the upcoming days. As again, we don't want any more outages, and especially when they happen, when at prime time, when everyone is trying to access their internet and streaming Netflix, and but yes, that's kind of what happened in the last 2 days.
Let's see. So, 2 modulators, they're 12 years old. We used a spare. Do we have any more spares?
Yes, and there's more on the way.
Okay. There'd been some talk, probably 4 to 5 years ago, about maybe splitting the head end, or having an alternative head end, so that, are we still kind of looking at that in the long term?
Yes, this is something that, Chris and I, we are discussing. With fiber to the home, with the fiber to the home technology, that's something that we can easily do.
Okay.
With the cable technology is harder because everything has to come from one source. But by having, with fiber, you can feed it from multiple
Yeah, the redundancy
locations.
is
Yeah, you
important, I
have more
think, in that as
redundancy.
we go.
Yeah,
Okay, this potential putting down of the system or a portion of the system, in the, what might be an easy game for me at 2 in the morning to have you put the system down, there might be some people, so that we're gonna certainly clearly advertise this, right?
Yes, I'll work with Jackie as soon as we pick a date. Like I said, we're working with the manufacturer. As soon as we can lock everyone's availability, I'm sure Jackie will post something and notify subscribers.
Jackie, help me out. If I'm at home and I know nothing about nothing, except that I have my iPhone and I can still get to Facebook, and I lose internet, and I type, has anybody lost internet on Raymond Ave? Happens I live on Raymond Ave, that's why I asked. Is there someplace better, than me going out and asking the general public, because then you get 5 million people all coming, around town who's got internet, who's not? Can you kind of fill me in on what we do or what our plan is?
Typically when we have an outage, and there's widespread affecting a large number of customers, or is gonna be of a long duration, we'll post it on our Facebook. So we're at SELCO News, so facebook.com/SELCO News will get you to us. You can follow us and you'll see our posts. If it's an individual issue, and oftentimes what we're seeing on these Facebook posts isn't a widespread issue, it really is affecting an individual's home, and a lot of the other folks who maybe are chiming in or having router issues, or it could be unrelated, is a lot of what we're seeing. First thing, call the help desk. They're there to help you. They can, if it is an individual issue, they'll walk you through the process. They'll take a look at your best options. They'll make recommendations if it is a router issue for what you can do to replace it. We do offer a Wi-Fi product that's managed by us, and we do provide support for it for an additional $9.95 per month. And that solves an awful lot of problems for folks who are having connectivity issues. But in a bigger, wider spread event, we are posting it to Facebook. And that is, we're finding that to be a quick way to hit a large number of customers. At this point, we don't have an outage notification system per se for the internet. That may be available to us in the future as we look at potential changes to our billing system going forward. But it wouldn't be something that would be available today or tomorrow. That would be a down-the-road kind of thing.
We also changed, and Jackie does the voicemail recordings.
Yep, so if you're calling in during an outage, oftentimes you'll hear, we're experiencing an outage, and we know about it. So folks, when they hear that, will often hang up and not actually wait to get through to us, because they know that we're aware of it and we're working on it. So there is call queue messaging as well.
Well, some people are getting just a busy signal, though. Is that because it's overdriving that system, and do we need to make it more expansive?
Yes, that's a conversation Jackie and Greg from the IT department we've been having. The current system that we have, and especially we hit that quota on Friday, can only take about 50 incoming calls roughly. Especially on Friday, because the school was operating, it was, there were hundreds of customers literally calling. So we are talking about migrating some of that technology to Alianza, which is our phone provider that can do thousands of simultaneous connection.
Okay, so I've typed in on my Facebook, and I've said that I don't have any internet at Raymond Ave. I've called and I left a message, and now my internet comes back. It's a miracle. Or maybe I even unplugged and plugged in my router, and I've reset it myself, and I think I've solved the problem, but dang, they never called me back. Now, in a major outage, it would seem there's, with thousands of people, that we'd still be calling for what happened Friday and not be able to get up with what happened Sunday. So is there any sort of standard that we have for callback, or if we get the power back, we kind of make the gross assumption that people don't need to know, or what's going on?
So, on the power side, usually we're answering calls live, and there's not very often an opportunity for somebody to leave us a message where we would need to call them
Yeah.
back. They're either being answered live by our answering service or by our CSRs. On the help desk side of the house, it's a little bit different. There is an opportunity through that call queue to leave a message, and those folks are both trying to answer live calls and do callbacks. And I know that they were still calling people back today that they had received messages from over the weekend during the different outage experiences. And perhaps there's a better solution for that going forward. Joelle and I are going to talk about some options, but certainly they do have, we're all human, and they are literally calling people back one at a time to make sure we get back to them. So in the instance where it was a widespread issue and it's been resolved, they still have to sort through those messages to see if there were unrelated issues where somebody actually does need their immediate intervention, not just a courtesy call to say we're back up.
Sure.
And just to give you a little bit of perspective.
Yes, sir.
For the call volume that they were experiencing again, Friday was a holiday, so the help desk opened at 10 a.m., and by 10 a.m. they already have over 600 voicemail and 50 incoming calls coming in for only 3 guys that were working at the help desk. So we are working on strategizing and improving, of course.
So we were punished for jumping ahead and putting Juneteenth on the calendar ahead of everybody else.
I
Okay.
wouldn't go that far, but.
No, that's what happened, I know. Okay, but okay, so that was another
Yes,
anomaly
correct.
to a normal, what everyone else assumed was a normal workday. Most of the general public didn't know that it was a holiday for SELCO, and so therefore, everybody was basically at battle stations on the start, what they thought was the start of a 3-day weekend for themselves then they were called back and delayed for when the desk was gonna be made. Now, the help desk is open when? How long? How many hours a day?
10 to
So-
6 on
Yeah,
Friday?
so on Friday it was 10 to 6. Normally they're open 8 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Yeah.
Monday through Saturday, and then 10 to 10 on Sunday.
Okay.
So we have, for the most part, pretty sufficient coverage during the busiest times of the day. That was absolutely a unique situation just with the timing of it.
But we're already looking, even before this outage, because we have experienced outages in the past.
Sure.
Luckily at night, when there's not that many people
Yeah.
calling. But we have already, that was something that Grace kind of put already on my radar, that when these situations happen, we're not well prepared.
Yeah, well, the IT cable folks find out what the electric folks find out. You're only as good as your last snowstorm.
That is correct.
So now that you've had that casualty, it's how do you make it up to the customers and make sure that we try to not have the same repeat? Yes, sir.
Could I just make leveraging this as a speaking point for a future budgetary item?
Just so you know.
Yeah. So 2 things real quick. One is an enterprise system that has a much closer, if you opt to use it, a much closer touch point to the end user where you have your own portal. If you put your email in, you'll be told what's going on with your account. And that way, so I bunch telecom and electric in today's world, it's the same. And so with AMI, as we start to ramp up AMI technologies, we'll know, the questions I've had in the past is, wait, it's 2021, why am I still calling you? You should just know. And so AMI will provide that, and so when it goes out, we're notified. When it's restored, both you and the utility are notified. And then same with fiber, and correct me if I'm wrong, but with the fiber routers, that now has the same functionality where it will report back, hey, home 1, 2, 3, 4 Main Street is out. And so then we'll know from our endpoint it's out, we'll know it's restored, and if you sign up for your contact method, you'll know at the same point. So that way, we're not trying to keep up with returning, say you have a superstorm Sandy, you can't return thousands of phone calls, but we'll have a platform in place to say, if you opt in, you'll know as much as we know up to the minute. And so that's,
Approve your budget request.
no, that's not what we're trying.
Holding you to that.
Oh, you need
Yeah, without knowing the dollar
It's
amount.
hard, because, I
Didn't tell you what it cost.
I freely admit, I'm an analog person in a digital world. And so when it goes down, I have no clue except for, well, I can unplug this and I can plug it back in, and if it doesn't work, then I better call somebody. But I can understand the frustration. I mean, you had school, it was, I think, the last day of school for many of the kids. It was, they were remote, the number of them were remote, and they're trying to close out their year. Moms and dads are still working from home when the kids are home, so it got exacerbated. It was pretty nasty, it sounded like it. It was great up in Maine, though.
Yeah.
Katahdin was beautiful, but anyways, yeah. Anyways, with that said, is there anything else do we need to bring in open session?
Or just say thank you to the people who worked hard on
Yes.
what should have been a day
Yeah.
off.
Well, I concur with that as well. If not, I will entertain a motion to close the open hearing, to immediately go into executive session and not return to open session.
So moved.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. It is now 2016 or 8:16, and the open session has been completed. Thank you.
Because it's all of
Oh, you
these put
got it?
together.
Oh, and
No, it's.
I was supposed to, I'm sorry, Krista and Liz from SMC, I wanted to thank, and if they haven't shut me off yet, they've done a great job helping us, because this has been the first time that we've actually been live for a SELCO meeting. So thank you to Krista and Liz from SMC. Thank you.
Bob, Microsolo, are they supposed to have,